welcome to the High Performance Cricket Podcast. Today, if you listen to this podcast in full, I can guarantee that you will take away something that can make you a better cricketer right now today. Whether you're a cricketer striving to make it to the top, whether you're a coach who's trying to help other cricketers achieve their dreams, or you're a parent of a cricketer who wants their kid to get the best out of themselves and enjoy their cricket as much as you possibly can, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Jason Cox, the founder of High Performance Cricket. And at High Performance Cricket, we combine strength and conditioning, mental skills, the cricket technical and tactical skills, and overall lifestyle development from nutrition, recovery, and everything that goes into making cricketers a better player. I have all my links down below in the description. If you have any interest in working with us to become a better cricketer or your child to become a better cricketer. But for now, let's get into the show. Welcome back to the podcast, guys. Here we got ourselves an absolutely great man here. You got James Fitzgerald. I'll let him introduce himself. But Fitzy, welcome, mate. Give us a couple minutes rundown, mate, who you are, what you do, and all that sort of stuff.
Thanks for having me on, Coxie. We appreciate it, man. I don't know if I've got 2 minutes, but I'll do my best. My name's James Fitzgerald, as Coxie mentioned. As you can probably understand, I've got an absolutely bizarre accent, and it comes from about 14 different places. But I'm originally from Gibraltar, which is down a British territory in the south of Spain. So we'll see the accent's a bit bizarre. Working in professional cricket at the minute, so I'm kind of the interim lead S&C or strength and conditioning coach and academy strength and conditioning coach as well, kind of syncing the two roles in together at the minute, where, we work from our pathway players right from, 11 and 12 all the way up to our professional program at the minute, which sounds like a lot, and it is, but it's been an incredible experience. Aside from kind of what I'm doing at the minute, I've the classical thing, went to university afterwards. We're kind of wondering, well, James, where did you get from Gibraltar to working abroad? Coming over from uni, classic sports science degree, and didn't quite know what I wanted to do. I was really interested in nutrition and psych as well, but I didn't quite have that itch to kind of carry it on. And I used to be a rower back in the day, and back in the day, I'm not 35. A few years ago, I used to row, for a decent amount of time, and S&C was a massive thing that was brought out from the age of 12. And we'll get onto that, ages and when athletic development should start. But that progressed onto that real big love for for strength and conditioning, for going gym, and for doing all sorts of things. And that led on to me having a bit of an addiction to gaining as much experience as I could. So finishing undergrad and going into doing masters at Loughborough University, I was just like, I have a feeling that I need to set myself aside. I'm being brutally honest here, and I might be selling myself short a bit, but I'm an awful student in the classroom. I give it my absolute all, but gee whiz, I absolutely despise sitting down and listening to someone. I would much rather be in a gym floor learning from someone about how to do a certain thing, or going out to placement and learning how a certain coach does it. So for me, being very much kind of practical orientated, as I like to call it, I went and found as many placements as I could. So I started off at Cardiff City in Wales, where I was working as an academy sports science placement student there. So I did that for a full year. I literally worked from under 9s all the way to what was then under 23s, which is now under 21s. And then that kind of led an interest into when I went to Loughborough. I was like, right, cool. I've got this experience in football now. I'm an absolute cricket badger myself, guys, by the way. So I play as well on the side. Not very well, before you ask, not very well. But so that led on to an interest in, right, cool. I want to get into multi-sport and be able to, whatever sport I get into as a job career, I want to be able to know that I've worked in it. I've worked from right the way in the academy to right the way into the first team environment. So I worked for about 6 months at Warwickshire County Cricket Club, which is obviously just about an hour down the road from Derby. Worked at East Midlands Blaze, which now is equivalent of Nottinghamshire's women's side. And then realised after that one where, again, same thing. was looking at myself and thinking, where do I lack? You know, I was almost the best thing that I do now is work with a couple of people who are going through the same journey that I went through. And I'm like, right, if I look at a job description, where do I compare to someone? And I was lacking in a bit of first team football experience. So went to work for Birmingham City, and then, you know, the job at Derbyshire came up, and, you know, I couldn't really turn it down. It was right down the roads. The kind of the way that Derbyshire are building things now, yes, it's very different to what it was when I joined a couple of years ago, but, you know, it's kind of got better, if you like. But, you know, I looked up to a lot of SNCs in the field, and the SNC at the time, James Bell, was someone who I was looking up to, in the sense that, right, cool, his career path has been very similar, you know, from footy to cricket. And then, you know, so that ability to work with him as well was definitely one. And I've been here ever since, mate. You know, I've moved through the ranks, if you like, and I'm loving it at the minute. It's busy, as you can imagine, like we spoke about before when we were on air, Coxie, but it's part and parcel of working professional sport. There's definitely a big difference in working in that, you know, having done it as well in drips and drabs in the private sector. You can't compare to seeing the boys win, seeing guys sign professional contracts. You know, the feeling is just amazing, mate. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell of probably about 3 minutes and 43 seconds. But sorry, apologies.
Matt, that's awesome. I love that, mate. And I think one thing that people can tell is obviously your passion and your love for it as well. And I think one thing that I think there's good links between, you know, a strength and conditioning career and also a good athlete, a good cricketer as well. And one thing there that you sort of touched base on was all your different experiences in different sports at different levels. And I think for cricketers as well, like playing different sports and experiencing different cultures and playing in different teams and things like that is like super valuable for a cricketer's development and making you a more all-round player, as I'm sure would make you a more all-round coach. I think me and you, we sound, you know, pretty similar from our coaching path as well. Like, I'm probably someone who's not really much of a classroom, wouldn't call myself an academic by any stretch of the imagination. Or I barely passed my uni assignments. I was very much a P's get degrees operator, but I was the exact same. I'd rather get a 52% on an assignment, but do 100 hours more coaching for the semester than anybody else. And you're going to learn a lot more doing that. And I think that's what young cricketers and that can take away from that too, is like, be a doer, like actually do things. You can learn things and read things and all that sort of stuff, but at some stage you've really got to start applying your knowledge and applying the things that you learn. Otherwise, you're just going to become, you know, this person who knows a lot but doesn't actually do anything as well. One thing that I'm really curious to know about, I want you to tell me, who would you describe yourself as a cricketer? Who do you play like, and pump up your cricket game for us?
What? Oh, gee whiz, I'd probably describe it as James Fitzgerald, probably someone's naff, but nah. Gosh, you know, on my very own level, at my level that I play at, which is definitely no kind of eye opener, but Liam Livingston is someone who I look up to quite a decent amount, and how far he hits it. And with my younger lads, you know, I always use the example of Liam Livingston when I get them to do anything power related or anything which resembles a cricket shot. You know, Liam Livingston's my guy to go to. You know, there's one thing which is being able to hit the ball far, but then being able to hit the ball as far and as consistently as he does, you know, is pretty special. You know, Heinrich Klaassen is one of those guys as well, where you just look at him and you're just like, yeah, you know, Livy's a big guy, you know, but then Heinrich, somewhere you're just like, well, Heinrich's not that big of a bloke. And you're just like, and having a couple of the lads who have actually played with him at the 100, and you're just like, that guy's scary to bowl at, because, you know, if it comes back at you, there's not much that's gonna stop, mate. So yeah, definitely try and describe myself as someone who clears the ropes as much as I can. Be that guy who is a finisher, if you like. I love that role, you know, being able to keep everyone, you know, even if and I had it once, you know, where, so to give you a bit of context, I'm not going to drop it in there, but, you know, I played for Gibraltar, is what we call like an associate level nation. So, you know, playing like ICC tournaments as well, like the qualifiers and stuff. So probably a couple levels down from where your Netherlands and your Italy's are, if you like. And, you know, being able to know that, you know, playing those games, and if we need which happened once actually. 16 off the last three. Them thinking that they've won it and then finishing it with a 4 and 2 6s, mate. Best thing that's ever happened in my life. So like things like that, mate. Like being able to finish games and that, like Livy does. If you like. So that's probably where I would go to. Nowhere near his level, of course, but definitely, yeah. Well, look up to from there, but. Yeah, mate, what you mentioned before that was so true in terms of like actually doing stuff, before we move on, because I almost get two types of cricketers, whether professionals or academy players, where they're guys who, let's be honest, Coxie, I think you can agree, mate, where S&C isn't something which you look at and they're like, they have to come in and do it to become a better cricketer. They normally, you traditionally, they do their skill, they do it well, they do it loads, they practice, and they naturally get better at it. S&C is something which has come into the forefront maybe the last 20 years, 25 years or so. And it's something where we've established that we know that if they do it on top of it, it'll become a lot better. However, it's not something where if a clubby wants to reach out to you and become a better cricketer, which they do to you and you do to a very, very good standard, that's them doing extra work and being a doer and putting themselves out there to do more stuff to become a better cricketer. Because like I mentioned, there's guys who also do very little S&C and we do very little work with them. They do the absolute basics about what works for them, and they've had a 25-year professional career. However, there's definitely more players who do S&C very well and are gun cricketers than the latter one of those that I just mentioned before. So, yeah, putting yourself out there, and it's the same with education. And we're going on a bit of a tangent here, mate. Apologies, but it's the same thing. You got to put yourself out there into doing the stuff that maybe you find a bit uncomfortable, or you're not quite good at, or that's going to give you the most amount of bang for your buck on a daily basis. So yeah, mate, that's a couple of those answers, mate. I reckon.
That's awesome. No, I love that, mate. Nothing better than a tangent, mate. Let's go on a couple of this chat.
Let's do it.
That's awesome. 100%. Mate, you mentioned your academy athletes before, and the boys and the girls probably as well here work with there. Talk me through like how well those academy guys are, and I'd love to know like what's like the first thing you do like when you get a new bunch of academy kids in. What things are like you're assessing? What things you're looking at from a physical point of view, from a skills and mental point of view? What are the things that you're looking at straight away to help put together, the best plan for them to get them to first team?
Yeah, that's an awesome question to start, mate. Because first and foremost, I'm going to go a bit off topic and be like, right, cool. In order to help as many guys become be academy players to become first team players, you got to have an amazing team in place to do that. So when I first came in and was in for my first winter, as we call it, we established that, right, cool. If we don't have the resources to hire all these people like Sykes, nutrition, let's build a team where we can maybe get some guys experience at the same time. So we were incredibly lucky. We got now, and we have had the same two Sykes for 2 years now, who are one's at Loughborough University, one's at Derby University. Lara and Abby, they work with the guys every single session. So whether they're delivering or just they're supporting, they're fantastic. And then we've got some nutrition students which, pop in and out. They've been brilliant this year. Bhavanti and Jazz, just give a mention in case you're listening. They definitely owe me a five after this, mate. But no, it's they do a brilliant job, because ultimately I'm a massive believer in I've got to stick in my own path. Yes, 100%. I could have done a module at uni which helped with or delivered me some basic nutrition or some basic psych, but mate, I don't have that same training. I don't have that same experience as they do to be able to react with someone on a nutritional basis. And the boys might not have the confidence to ask me. So, building that team around us, which helps with that, is foremost, because if you don't have those procedures in place, something will loosen. It's almost like a Formula One car. You've got to have those really tight screws bolted on well, and then everything else that comes alongside that is secondary. So on to when we get a new crop of academy players in, again, all members of staff are in. We go through the traditional kind of testing battery where we'll see where they're at physically, we'll see where they're at mentally, and we'll see where they're at in terms of, right, are they a decent, we kind of come up with some of our own procedures and some of our own what we call RAG rating systems, where from a cycling nutrition point of view, we see where they're at, right? Are they more dominant towards a certain trait, which is way over my head, but it's incredible to watch. And then it allows us to kind of present to the coaching staff as to where they're at in all facets. From a physical point of view, from my side, I've changed my approaches, Coxie, if I'm being honest with you, and they always change, not because I think that it's not a robust procedure, but I think as you work in professional sport and as you work, as you do, Coxie, you know, with people one-to-one, you're constantly changing things all the time based on what your feedback is from senior members of staff, from people who get advice from CPD that you do on a, you know, for more education that you do. So for me, traditionally, we will break down the body into segments and be like, right, cool, where are they at? Right. So if it is, you know, for younger athletes, for me, the most important one is movement competency, right? If we're thinking about someone who's progressing through and at the start, they've got terrible techers in being able to do an RDL, do a squat, do a lunge, do a hinge, the basic kind of athletic motor skill competencies that we do, we need to iron those out first. So we do that test first. I've come up with a little bit of a trick where actually, you know, I find a software where the parents can do that remotely. So it means that, you know, that's not a test that we need to do, thankfully, in person. They do that before they come in, which is amazing. I mean, that saved us an absolute truck ton of time, which is good. And then that moves on to like your physical stuff. So, right, for an academy player, their provision is going to be very different to what maybe an under 16s player who's on our pathway is going to look like, because they're not on the same kind of, you know, not mean to be disrespectful, but they're not on the same they're not on the same level. So our academy players, you know, get the full MOT, you know, we're like, right, cool. So where are they at torso capacity wise, right? Do they have the capacity to work in whether it be upper body, torso, lower body, through things like, you know, extended glute bridges, the traditional stuff which you see from the capacity side. For me, that is what we'll get onto in a little bit, mate, where some people sometimes lose their head a bit in the sense that, right, cool, yeah, they've got the capacity to work. They can, you know, they can do pretty much anything. It's not quite the case. For me, then that transitions as the winter goes on and we can see a trend in how things progress. Right, cool. They've got the capacity to work. Let's double down on that. Make our strengths our super strengths. When we get to January time, right, cool. Let's see where they're at from or maybe just before that. You know, let's see where they're at from a strength point of view, from a maximal strength point of view, from an isometric point of view. You know, how much force they're putting through the floor, mid-thigh pull, you know, Natera ankle knee push, you know, whether it be, you know, CMJs are something that we use as a monitoring tool that throughout the winter. But that's just there so we can see from a quantitative point of view where they're at. And then, like I said, as that progresses even further, you look at your power stuff. You're like, right, cool. How can we look at our high-speed running? How can we look at our accels, our decels, our change of direction stuff? So it progresses as we get through the year. I think if you sometimes, and I've seen it a couple of times actually, and people will be a bit afraid to admit it, where you're almost cramming as many tests as you can in one go. And you're like, right, cool, we've got all this data now. What are we using it for? And I'm scratching my head sometimes. I'm just like, why the hell are you doing, you know, a 10-meter acceleration in November where we're 6 months out from, you know, actually doing it in person? You know, they're going to get that from their skill naturally. They're not, you know, realistically, they're not, unless, you know, you've got a decent bit of cash and, you know, you've got a marquee outside and you're netting on grass from, you know, November. You know, realistically, the ability to develop something won't take much longer than 3 months, maybe a month and a half, maybe even a month. So from our side, we're like, right, let's break it into segments, because you wouldn't test everything at the same time, and you wouldn't in a training program do multiple qualities at the same time. So why would you test it that way? Test for what you're doing at the minute. Use it a bit more respectively. That's probably where I've been at the minute. So then where those guys are at will determine what their program will be. So I'm very much about, obviously, as other SNCs would be, as of course, I hope so anyway, where they, you know, the programming influencer, sorry, my apologies, the all the testing will influence what they need to do moving forward. So if it is a capacity issue, mate, right, let's sort that out. And if it is, they are good where they are, right, let's double down on it for a little bit. Let's, have that decent block to start with, and then they can progress at their own level. But then that comes down to the skill of the S&C to see how that progresses a little bit faster than everyone else's, and progress as they go along, mate.
Matt, that's great. That's absolute greatness. And obviously, that comprehensive testing that you do, you would see a lot of different athletes who have come in with some strengths and weaknesses. But is there any certain trends of any specific areas of weakness, whether it be capacity, whether it be lack of speed or power or strength in certain areas for younger cricketers coming through, or for club cricketers coming through, that there is different to what the top guys are? And what sort of interventions, exercises, sets and reps would you put in place to address some of these, deficiencies that these guys might have?
Oh yeah, mate, that's a massive question in the global context, because that's almost what we want testing to be. We want testing to, like I just mentioned there, mate, want testing to influence our programming, but not the other way around. I think some people almost train their athletes, and I've seen it many times before, mate, where people train their athletes to get better at the test, not to become better at the skill. And I'm just like, what on earth are you doing? Like, you're like, do you want this guy to be good at an NFL combine if he's a professional cricketer? No. So why are you training him to have a better CMJ? No. You need to break it down into what we want. So a few trends that we probably see, and I think the trend that we see might be slightly different to other counties, because our testing battery is much more, I would say, unique to some of the other counties, where we've come up with our own couple of tests which allow us to identify some key areas. So an example for you, mate, is torso capacity. And this is a big passion of mine around the torso and linking in the torso with cricket, because let's be honest, from your side, Coxie, if you think about a torso and you think about professional cricket, everyone will use their torso, right? So rotation, lateral flexion from a bowling point of view, rotation from a batter, rotation whilst throwing, whatever it may be, the torso comes into an element. So I came up with a bit of a strategy, which, again, once you've got the capacity to work, so yes, the traditional, GHD side hold, where you go, right, you can hold it for, 90 seconds to 2 minutes? Perfect. That's all well and good. How strong is it? So using things like the Val dynamometer has been incredible. Not sponsored, by the way. If they want to get in touch, mate. If they want to get in touch,
I'll put my hand up and say, yeah, me too as well. Vol, if you want to get in touch and hand over some stuff, I'm available. Emails down below.
That's brilliant. But if we were able to test isometric strength from a yielding point of view, right? So how strong are they at the torso, right? Because, mate, if I asked you, Coxie, does being able to hold a 2-minute side plank correlate to Mark Wood or a guy who's bowling 150 clicks? It's not the same contraction speed. It's not any contraction speed, if you like. It's holding isometrically, so it's not the same. It's not the same. So we came up with a bit of a plan in place to see where they are isometrically, and then from a rate of force development point of view, so almost how fast are you contracting. And we found, the actually middle ground between that. So that ability to produce force, so good strength, was there. That's from a rotation point of view, right? Cool. Yeah, you're 8 to 9 each side, fantastic. Yeah, you're 3 or 4 med balls into the wall, and you're done and dusted. No, like let's prescribe you with actual yielding isometrics. For example, it might be using a Palloff, but it might be using a Palloff press, where we use the Val dyno to actually get a prescription as to how much force they're producing. And then once you move on to the power side, where you see those med ball movements, we've almost seen a massive jump in what guys are rotating at, because we've almost found that middle ground between both of those. From a capacity point of view and a power point of view, there was a bit of a lack of middle ground, and we found it now. So yeah, one of those was definitely kind of torso strength. So torso capacity's always been there. where our younger guys might do like your traditional side plank, extended plank, to our senior academy guys and our pros who do GHD work, where kind of puts our body at a longer lever and makes it a lot harder and stresses the body and that's one thing I'll say, Coxie. One thing I've learned recently, mate, is just be so specific, and break down things into what replicates the stresses of elite cricket, right? And professional cricket. When guys are playing 4-day cricket, when guys are playing T20, whether it is in the UK or around the world, what are the demands that they're getting on whilst they're doing their individual skill? And just try and replicate that as much as you can, and you're in a good spot. You're doing good. You're doing good. So yeah, a lot of the demands which we see might depend as well based on a lot of the kind of norms that we might see might differ based on where they are. If they've come into the academy when they're maybe 15 or 16, where we've worked with them for nearly 3.5, 4 years, it might differ to someone maybe who's come in maybe when they're 17 or 18, and we've only got a year, maybe 2 years to work with them, and they might have come from, like you mentioned, like club cricket background, where they might not have done a truckload of S&C, and their movement competencies aren't there because they might not have been in a program for, in a pathway program before. So it's almost about trying to, not rush things, but almost speed it up a bit and understand where they are and a plan to get there, mate. So, from our pro side, where we might see a lack is, specific soft tissue areas where you might be like, right, are you good from a hip quadrant point of view? So hip quadrant, where we look at, adduction, abduction, extension, and flexion, there's massive differences in our fast bowlers, who's strong and where. They'll traditionally probably be very strong in your hip flexion, very weak in hip extension, or the other way around. I've seen it in both cases. But then on the flip side of that, your batters, from your sweeps, from your rotations, from, your hip coming through into extension, you see very good adduction and abduction scores. So, it's almost trying to understand, where those guys are at with using such a massive test battery. And then, you move on to kind of your traditional jumps, your reactive stuff, where you might look at a counter movement jump versus like a drop jump. And we're like, right, so if we're thinking about a batter should probably be able to produce an incredible amount of force through the floor to be able to hit the ball as far as they can. But then a seamer should also be able to do that, because, they're having to absorb like 14 times body weight when they're landing. And you're just like, right, how do you differentiate that? Well, looking at things a bit more in detail, a lot of people just look at jump height and they're like, oh my God, he's got like a 51 centimeter CMJ. And then you actually look at how much force he's producing through the floor, and you're just like, all right, okay, maybe not. It's just because he weighs about 10 kilos, mate. That's why I'm just like, all right, cool. So, sorry about that. So yeah, it's almost about having a bit of a dive into the systems that they've got there, and understanding it from right, and brings on to our isometric test about how much force are they producing. If they're producing a decent amount of force compared to their own body weight, I'm happy. I'm not fussed about how high they jump from centimeter wise. I'm not fussed about, how quick they are off the ground from a certain point of view. I want per body weight, per kilogram of body weight that they have is relative. Relative scores are, in my eyes, so much more crucial than, absolute scores, because we get a better idea as to how much they're using the mass that they've got, mate. So that's probably where we see a few from that point of view.
Mate, that's elite. I think you really highlight the importance for like individualization and actually having a plan that makes you better, and not just jumping on like a quick cutter program, or not just doing something because your mate's doing it or something like that. Whether that's S&C, skill-wise as well, I'm sure it's the exact same. People just do the same drills because they might see it on Instagram or something like that. Whereas like the drills that you see on Instagram, or the exercises that you might see, me posting for somebody, is to plan for that person there. And absolutely, like, that's not to say that most people can do the same exercise, but it might be for a different reason. And the other exercises and the sets and reps might be different, complemented around that as well. So just the importance of understanding where you're at as a cricketer and from a physical point of view is so crucial. And then just making sure you're then having a specific plan and training with a purpose. I think that's one thing as well that I can tell you're really passionate about, is having a purpose for your training and actually getting better at things that you actually want to get better at, rather than sort of just guessing and hoping to get better.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm going to put myself out there, Coxie, because before I probably said, I looked at some of the things that people do, and, that I look at them and say, what on earth are you doing? But then to a certain extent, if they've got their own pathway and they've got their own systems in place to move from test to, to adaptation, that's, held myself off to them. So I'm always about, an adaptation driven approach. So I want everything that you're doing, or as close to, I want that to be able to affect your performance moving forward, right? So, or adapt to affect your performance moving forward. If I want someone to improve their vertical peak force, we use a CMJ to test that. We then use, like you mentioned before, which I didn't mention, mate. Sorry, apologies. What exercise I might use. So, for example, let's say a vertical peak force for, a fast bowler who's very kind of shoulder dominant, or very front on, as we call it. You might say, right, so let's see where they're at from their strength point of view. So isometrically, they produce a great amount of force through the floor. They're very strong, but they're not very powerful. So, right, cool. Let's do a massive power block in using things like, trap bar, deadlift. Right, cool. The strength is there. Let's maintain that strength. Let's move on to a block after that where we're starting to introduce some power. So it might be a trap bar deadlift, but it might be a trap bar deadlift, with, less load and more speed through the bar. Then we can go, right, cool. Let's strip off even more weight and let's move that bar even faster. So let's do a trap bar shrug. So link in what are some of our maybe Olympic weightlifting derivatives is, for example. And then let's strip that even more and let's go a trap bar jump shrug. And let's do that. And then you can almost, hopefully, with those kind of 5 differences, you see where you're progressing through from our strength to our power. We're still maintaining that strength. And then hopefully, you in a block of 3 months, 6 months, and you test them again. We test our players, just for some context, every maybe 2 months. We test them 3 times throughout the winter. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, we monitor them throughout the season as much as we can. And then you can see that raise in performance, man. And if not, I'm not going to hold myself out there and say, look, every single athlete that I've ever worked with, has improved exactly what I want. Of course not, mate. We're coaches. We're always learning from what procedures, are best for us. And I think from our side, if, there's definitely some stuff which has worked for me very well. And thankfully, I can say that more's worked than not. So that's good. But there's definitely been some stuff where I'm just like, that looking at the data respectively, mate, it's not quite worked. Let's reevaluate. Let's go back to the drawing board. And from another side, you're just like, I look back at some of my programming I did 2-3 years ago. And I'm just like, what the flip was that? That is junk. I'm just like, but it's a learning curve, and learning what procedures we use and how we can adapt that to each player is mega important, because a pathway, even though we're having this great conversation now, Coxie, you've probably got different procedures to what I've got. I've got different procedures to what our new lead S&C has, and his is different to his old boss, and it all differs, but we all follow that same trend. So yeah, that's definitely where it all kind of stems from, and where we progress with it, because like I mentioned, mate, like there's more, and to finish that question, mate, like it's, or to this point, sorry, it's like there's more than one way to skin a cat, so yeah, that's terrible saying, but like, yeah, there's definitely more ways to do that, and there's multiple ways to go about it. You just kind of got to have that rationale, and you've got to have that approach to performance, and you've got to have that right plan in place, and you're sorted.
Mate, I think that's absolutely spot on. Like, I think that's like the thing you mentioned before about like not every athlete they've coached has got massive results, and that's just because humans aren't robots. It's not we do this one exercise and then this person gets better. There's no training is guessing. Like we don't know for sure. We have obviously we have a good idea from science and from our own experiences and things like that around if we do a squat, then they're probably going to develop force and get stronger quads and bigger quads. But there's so many factors that go into making an athlete better. And there's so much factors for an athlete themselves to make them better. If someone does a lot of underarm drills and works on their technique, batting wise, doesn't exactly mean they're going to get better because there's so many things where dynamic systems that's forever being variable. And I think, for example, I just did a testing with an athlete yesterday, and his old man just sent me an email asking, what are some targets that he should be aiming for to improve, in the next 12 weeks? And I'm just like, look, I can't guarantee exactly what he's going to get. There's so many variables that go into it. I don't want to put a floor. I don't want to put a ceiling. Like if I say, let's aim for 5 centimeters increase in a vertical jump, then I don't want to cap it there. But how about this? How about we just make it a goal? Let's just rock up 3 times per week. Let's follow the nutrition advice that I've given. Let's follow the sleep and recovery advice to a T. And then make sure we train hard. And then let's just see what happens. And we'll see what happens from there.
Totally.
And we'll just forever be adjusting, communicating, and then from there we'll find out at the end of the block how he's going. And I think for athletes as well, it's about being okay with the unknown, I reckon, as well, and just being like, you know what, I'm just going to stick to this process and sticking with it long enough for it to work. Because I reckon if you stick with something long enough, then it's just going to work, and you just need to keep on sticking with it as well. And the training program could be absolutely brilliant, but if you're not doing things outside of your training program as well to support that, then you're not going to get the results that you want. What are like some of the big rocks for you? Let's say outside coming into the training that you really like drill into athletes to nail their recovery or just their lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your point, you just said before, Cox, that's brilliant because from our side, we don't even put any quantitative markers on it from when we speak to them because we're just like, well, like you mentioned, mate. Well, we could have guys that we have a perfect training block, we have a lovely macro cycle, we have a lovely 4 or 5 mesocycles in there, and we're like, brilliant, this guy's going to improve. We're like, come on, get in there. And then when you factor in things like school, you factor in things like exams, you factor in the guys are growing up, they might be going out a bit more, fair play to them, they might be wanting to socialize. They might not be recovering as well. They might be going to a new school, so a bit of nerves might be there, which we have sometimes. All those factors come in and you're just like, oh, shit. Oh, he's not improved. Oh, damn. Like, what's happened there? And then you look at these factors and then you can kind of highlight, what might be going wrong with that point of view. So like I mentioned, mate, like we can control as much as we can control. But as soon as they leave the building, mate, they're their own person and they've got to adjust to it from their own point of view. So whether it is, like you mentioned, mate, sleep, nutrition, things like that, they're all stuff that we kind of can't control to a certain extent. So we're almost just like, we're almost sending them away being like, please, 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 please be good, please be good. And you're just like hoping that they improve. And you're just like, well, sugar, like, yeah, they're probably not gonna. Yeah, if he goes to bed at 2 a.m. every night because he's messing around with his mates and he's got to be at school at 7 in the morning, he's not going to be as tip-top shape, is he, when he comes in the evening to be with us, mate? So, sleep's a massive one. A lot of boys struggle when they're going through, obviously, maturation and they're going through puberty and they're, moving from, adolescence to maturing to adults. They struggle, they're being put through a lot for their age because, yes, one of the best things I've ever seen, mate, is that, young players, are not smaller adults, so you don't treat them that way. And I completely agree. So, but then at the same time, you're asking them to almost be professional cricketers before they're professional cricketers. And you're almost asking them to build habits before they actually become, they sign on the dotted line. And they're just like, what, Fitzy, why the flip am I doing this at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday night, mate? I should be chilling my sack. And they're just like, well, you want to be a professional cricketer, right? Well, this is what, we need to be doing, mate. So, yeah, from our side, drilling sleep as much as we can. Like I mentioned, mate, we build our MDT around us to make sure that we've got all the plans in place to be able to deal with these things. So educating our boys around sleep, about recovery, about, mental strategies, which, is way over my head, like I mentioned, but, strategies for them, which will make them better cricketers and be able to help them long term, is something that we do every single session. So, for example, at the minute, mate, on a Monday, it might be a psych delivery, and Lara might deliver something on close to the season. They're amazing, mate. They've come up with a plan in place for the last 4 weeks to be like, right, we're going to focus this on your game day routines. So game day -1 to game day, this is what your routines are going to be. So whether it might be some mental skills to be able to help with that, and then from Abby and Laura kind of deliver that from a psych point of view and be like, right, you guys, how do you, what's your routine like? So last night they almost got pieces of paper and they were writing down what their routine was from the day before to game day. And, it was awesome to see how different they were. And you're just like, well, they all could work. So it's just like you mentioned, mate, it's all individual. So like what works for someone, someone might want to go to bed incredibly early and wake up early and prep. Or someone might want to go to bed a little bit later, have a bit more of a chilled evening and wake up a little bit later. So they all both work because they're both getting their 7 to 9 hours sleep, but they might then differ after that. So, and then obviously from, Bhavanti and Jazz's side, dealing with nutrition, right? Are you fueling yourself enough? That's a massive one for us, mate, where, I don't know if you've ever heard of it before. So basically REDS, so relative energy deficiency in sport. So being a kid who is, let's say, maybe first year into A levels over here, or maybe just after like GCSE. So what are they about? Maybe 16, 17, something like that, where they are moving from classroom to classroom all day, or they might have free periods and they're studying, or they might be playing other sports. Ewan Barnsley, I listened to Ewan Barnsley's podcast, mate, and it was unbelievable because, I'm a big, I look up to Barnsley quite a bit. I didn't work with him too much when I was at Warwickshire, but, I could see that he had all the right stuff and all the right traits to be a brilliant coach. Is a brilliant coach. And, the intricacies he goes into and what he mentioned, everyone's different. These strategies in place where you want the guys to play multi-sport is something where we still want to encourage them to do. They get to a certain level, like you guys mentioned, where if they're kind of guys who are going to be professional cricketers and they might even sign early, you're just like, right, got to cut that out, I'm afraid. However, that comes down to us to mimic those qualities and other things. So yeah, if guys are moving from classroom to classroom, they're playing other sports, they might not have the fuel then to come in the evening to come and train with us. So then we're asking them to train at 100%. Or maybe not all the time, but, asking them to train at a specific percent when they're running on 0% or 1%, 2%, because they've not got the fuel there. So, they've been brilliant, Lara and Bhavanti, Jazz and Bhavanti in kind of strategies to help them do that. And it sounds like you do that as well, mate, where, you give them little hints and tricks, whether it might be, a shake in between, period 1 and period 2, or period, at break time, or whatever level they're at, whether it might be a granola bar, things like that, little things, and hopefully puts them in the best position to perform. And, the same thing goes with the pros, mate. Some of the pros, they do other things and they might lose track of, sugar, I've had breakfast and Fitzy's asking us to do a grim session outside. And you're like, gosh, I feel like absolute naff. And it's like, oh, well, how's your nutrition been? So, we've also got, first team nutritionist as well, Sam, who deals with everything as well. So yeah, those similar traditions, similar, it doesn't differ too much, I would say, Coxie, compared from what you do to what we do. It's just about building those good habits. Almost one of the best sayings that I've ever heard as well. I've heard a lot, but like it's like build brilliant basics, and you'll be all right, or you'll at least give yourself the best chance to do well, mate.
Mate, that's spot on. I could not agree any more with that at all. I think young athletes as well. I think a lot of young athletes can get in the habit of potentially overtraining and focusing on the volume rather than the quality. They're going they're doing. I prefer quality over quantity, whereas they're a lot just like, let's do more volume, more volume, more volume. I'm like, if we can get better, like if we can, let's say we want to get stronger. If we can get stronger from doing 6 reps, why would we do 10? You know what I mean? If we wanted to get this adaptation, why would we take 8 weeks if we could do it in 6? Or if we wanted to work on our Yorkers, why would we do it in 12 balls if we could get the same outcome from 2 balls? You know what I mean? So I think people's standards and the intensity which they train at in the gym, like you would have seen it so many times. People go into the gym, they have 3 sets and they do their first set and it's 60%, and then the next set 70, and the last one's 80, and they've probably done like 1 productive set. Whereas if you go and do a proper warm up, get stuck in, and you might need 2 sets at at an RPE 8 or 9 or 8 or 9 out of 10 intensity, all of a sudden you've got more out of 2 sets than what you have out of 3 or 4 if you're just going through the motions. So I think that is absolute gold for me there, I reckon. And also, like one thing that you touched on too is the energy levels and that from like junior cricketers and balance in school and all that sort of stuff. Off-season wise, what is the current like sort of training schedule, skills, S&C for your academy kids, let's say 16, 17, 18? What are they doing right now? And let's go, if you had a clean slate and could control it the way how you wanted to do it, exactly, how would you do it?
Yeah,
Monday to Sunday.
I love this question. When you emailed me and you had this question in there, mate, it was one of the first ones I looked at. Just to mention a point there before we progress on to it, mate, like I absolutely love what you said there, because almost I'm the same when it comes to, obviously I'm not going to lie to you, Coxie. I'm very strict with, and you and Barnsley mentioned this yesterday, where I was like, right, implementing skill and S&C, and where is the line? My line is as clear as day, mate. I've had a few sprayings when, I've probably crossed that line. So developing that early doors is probably the key principle, I reckon, for any S&C coming into professional sport, and not linking in. I've had interviews as well where I've almost linked in 2 skills together and they're just like, have they really got the most out of that, if you know what I mean? So, from our side, I think it's almost, if you link that, right, cool. I would rather 2 short bursts of, S&C and skills separate right next to each other, and you get the same adaptation than, I don't know, someone doing a 40-meter sprint with a high catch over and then catching it. Mate, they're not going to do it at the same intensity if they split it up and did 40 meters, had a little jog round, and then took a high catch. You're going to have 2 very different outcomes. I don't know if you know what I mean, mate. So, so yeah, like separating those 2, mate, and I'm a bit, I'm going to almost jump forward and then jump back, because I would much rather someone do very little and very often than do big day, be absolutely screwed the next day, big day, screw the next day, because, and it comes down to like, kind of like your microdosing principles, where, doing a little bit every day, and they almost find that you can get more volume that way. Ultimately, mate, I definitely agree with what you mean in the sense that doing quality over quantity. However, when you want a specific adaptation, like, hypertrophy or hyperplasia, whatever you want to call it, you need some of those volumes sometimes, and you're just like, well, okay, cool, let's get more volume, but let's do it in a sensible way. Like, let's be honest, mate, like, you have that right point where you can push someone. And even if you've got a specific sets and reps in the gym, and let's say you're going for hypertrophy for someone who's just come off an ACL injury, and you're just like, well, can you push yourself a couple more? Do you want to go one more set? Do you want to one more set, and then I'll give you tomorrow off? Do you want to, so that it's almost about being adaptive and into what's in front of you. So that, but yeah, like I mentioned, mate, quality over quantity for me. Definitely agree with that as well, mate. So for example, let's say an academy player, it might differ. I've seen some academies and worked in some academies where they might train 2 times a week. Sometimes where they train 3, sometimes where they train 4. And you're just like, right, okay. So how does that differ throughout the course of the week? Where if you're looking at academy player who, one thing which I found as well, mate, and I'll just jump back, is I think academy players, because they're younger, they're developing. Yes, you've got to be careful about, certain loads in certain areas. However, they can also probably take a little bit more battering from an S&C point of view and take a little bit more and adapt to it than a pro would. I almost find that with a professional cricketer, you need a bit more variety rather than stimulus. Whereas on the flip side, I think the younger players need more stimulus, but of the same stuff or similar stuff, and a bit more often. And then they'll get it that way. It's almost like a bit of a seesaw element, and you can almost see improvements that way. So for example, I'll just go off what we do, mate, because I think it's probably the best way, because things might have changed from place that I've been before, where our academy boys will come in twice a week with our academy, but then once a week with their pathway as well. So for me, I'm like, right, I could have 3 opportunities to gym. Do I need 3 to gym? Probably not. However, let's have 2 big days. Let's have 2 really good days with recovery on each side of that. And then let's, give them what I've been using as almost like our tendon health session. So it might be some, yielding isometrics at home, which have an element of active recovery in there as well. One thing which we mentioned before, and we jump back to, even off season, mate, I'm drilling brilliant basics in recovery in November. Same thing as we're drilling in June, in July when the season started. So using things like this on a weekly basis. So for example, our academy are in 3 times a week, like I mentioned, if you like. So, Monday and Wednesday, they'll have their big days. For me, I like to separate that anterior posterior, because on a Monday, they'll do their high speed running, which you're like, right. You don't want to overcook the posterior chain and be like, right, you're doing high speed running and then you're doing, posterior session after that, like hammies, glutes, stuff like that. And it's just like, they're going to be absolutely cooked for Wednesday. Even with the recovery, they're going to be absolutely cooked, because I will be. And then you almost switch it. And then on the Wednesday, you have your second big day where, you might do your accels, your what we call the intensive days, where you're like the accels, decels, change the direction. And then you go your posterior day. So you've almost got 2 hits of posterior and anterior, one from a gym session and one from sprinting. Or sorry, the other way around. So one from sprinting and one from our gym. And then, one from our sprinting and gym, but they're 2 different qualities. So that's the way I like to do it. And then that third session of the week, it's not quite a gym session. It's more like, right, if we've got any extra volume that we need to do, have we got any accessories? If they're an all-rounder, they might need a little bit more volume because they do multi-skill. So you're like, right, cool. He probably needs a little bit more emphasis on something that he's not done in the week, because, he's doing more skill. So that kind of, for us, it might be a Thursday or a Sunday that they might come in for that second session. It might change. So we base it off that. And we're like, right, cool. Can you get some tendon health stuff? Can you do some recovery? Can you do some more education? Can you have a one-to-one with the psych or the nutrition? Or can you do a bit more skill? Ultimately, mate, at this stage of the preseason that we're at, S&C's kind of taking a bit of a back step, and our skills take the priority. So from us, it might just be right. Do that, third tendon health session at home, and do the bloody skill. Do what you do. Hit some balls. Obviously bowling. Bowlers, take a little bit of a different approach. But can you do some what we, one person that you need to get on this pod, mate, is Ben Hutchinson, who's an Aussie as well, who works in our pathway, mate. Gee whiz, I've learned so much from Hutchie, no word of a lie, where we almost came up with a strategy where we went on those 2 heavy days, We went a big day where they're bowling flat out, combat nets, no technical feedback. And then we go our chill day, skill day, as we called it. So the volume's slightly higher. They're probably working on whether it might be, like you mentioned before, mate, white ball Yorkers. They might go back of the hand, slow, different deliveries, seeing position, like Barnsley mentioned. So those, we separate the days very clearly. The volume's different, but that's one thing that we've done. We've exposed our boys to those big days early on in the year, so then they can progress it along. And we've actually found, touch wood, mate, Jesus Christ, it better stay that way. If not, I'm out of a job. We've had no soft tissue injuries, no bone stress injuries, thankfully, yet. And we've been pretty good so far. So hopefully that continues, mate. And I have a feeling that it's been down to that, not only separating those days, but then also exposing them to those demands early doors. And then, having those really good recovery strategies in place for the month, mate. And then for our pros, it obviously differs slightly in the sense that, we joke in the MDT where we're just like, oh, should we bring them in? They're just doing S&C. And then, we all have that thought at some point. And then one of us chirps in and going like, mate, shut the flip up, mate. These guys are being paid to be here, mate. They're in when we bloody want them to be. And you're just like, yeah, it's true. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. They absolutely hate us for it, mate, but we're not there to obviously be buddy with them to a certain extent. So, our pros at the minute are doing 3 to 4 skill sessions a week. So for them, it's slightly different in the sense that, right, that's their job. And if the coaches want something of them, it's almost becoming a trend where if they want something of them, they'll do it. And we just have to almost alter and be flexible with what that is, if that makes sense, mate. So you're just like, right, you're almost from an individual point of view, you're managing boys throughout the week and just making sure they hit those targets, because if they don't, mate, I'll be chirps in their ear to do a little run for me on the weekend. But then on the flip side of that, if guys have done enough or they've done a bit too much, you cater for that as well. So for the pro stuff, it will look very similar to what an academy might from a gym point of view. However, like I mentioned, mate, as athletes get older, the variability needs to be there because they've adapted to those stimuluses already. The stimuluses are going to be higher. So yes, we can give an academy player high stimulus or higher stimuluses of the same dose. So like that same exercise. But I think there needs to be more variety in those doses from an elite or a professional player. And then you can, do things like that. One thing we've used with our pros is, like I said, building brilliant basics. When I took over as interim lead, mate, one thing I did straight away was, right, at the end of each week, we're going to do team recovery. And they're like, Fitzy, it's bloody it's bloody November, mate. What the flip are you doing? So yeah, but let's build good habits now, because when it comes to the season, mate, it becomes second nature. So at the end of every week, I've included things like reformer Pilates, we ice baths, nutrition. I'm a big one in nutrition. I'm like, right, boys, bars open, get whatever you need, and things like that, mate. And that's been instrumental into leading up to the winter now. Leading up into the season now. Sorry, mate. And then boys are in good shape, mate. Boys are in real good shape. You're always going to have to manage little things as things goes on. And, like I mentioned, mate, they do so much stuff, whether it might be from an academy or a professional cricketer point of view. So you just need to kind of be adaptable, mate. I think that's one thing which brilliant S&Cs do unbelievably well is, they've got that ability to be like, oh, right, that's happened this morning. No worries. Let's deal with it and let's adapt and see what we can do rather than what we can't do. Because if you're just focusing on, he's played rugby on the weekend, his, ankle's a bit sore. Why are you doing that? No, right, cool. Your ankle's a bit sore. Right, what can we do? Right, what is the diagnosis? If it's nothing, right, cool. Can we do an upper session? We'll do a lowers another day, for example. So it's just about being adaptable, mate, I reckon. Even though you've got that plan in the week, as funny as it sounds, mate, that plan lasts maybe for about 20 minutes for some players. And then you're just like, oh, right, cool, that's got to change now. But then, it's all well and good because, the guys have managed to still get the work in. They're just in different ways.
100%, that's spot on. I think I can relate so much, especially that last point as well, where often, the boys will come into the gym on a Monday after a weekend of cricket, or in the winter weekend of another sport. And most of the time, we've got the plan up on their team builder ready to go. And 3 minutes in, I've had a chat to them. Like, all right, we're changing this, we're changing this, we're changing this. And I spend 10 minutes, changing up everyone's programs on the spot there, because someone's got a bit of a sore side, someone's got a bit of a sore ankle, someone's bowled 30 overs, or someone's made a duck and they've done nothing, so they want a little bit more. So I think that's one thing I reckon that I've seen from a lot of like club cricketers or amateur cricketers I've worked with, is that they reckon if they can't do the exact program, then I won't come in. And I'm like, or if they're busy, I won't come in. I'm like, no, it's still so much more than what we can do, and I do have the ability to adjust your program based on what you've done. So it's really, really important to think about. That's a great thing. What can you do? I think the best players in the world, that they just bank sessions, they bank opportunities to just get better, no matter what it is. And it might be spending 30 minutes doing mobility, and then doing your like attendant health stuff, which is like your isometrics and things like that, which I think is like absolute golden to do. And you always leave those sessions feeling $1 million. So even if you do some, some ankle isometrics and some hamstring bridge isometrics, some the GHD isometrics, something like that, some Copenhagen's, just to get some sort of stimulus, you always leave feeling really, really good. And there's always ways as a cricketer that you can still have a productive session that's not the plan A session, no matter what's happened on the weekend, which is golden. One thing that I think is a nice thing to think about as well is to block your day. So do your skills and then do your weights on the same days too. That's to help replicate some of that game load stuff in the preseason and have big fatiguing days. Let's move now, like in season wise. How will that work? Let's go more like a club cricket point of view here. Let's say they just play cricket on the weekends. Run me through, let's say like a Monday through to Sunday. Once again, what are they doing from a skills, S&C point of view, recovery each day of the week to get themselves up ready for that weekend again?
Yeah. So, mate, just before I get onto that, one thing I wanted to chat to you about, because Barnsley mentioned it, you guys did. I'm a big fan of like overreaching and like preparing guys for worst case scenarios. And I learned that from Belly, who was here before me, where you almost expose them to and make them really fatigued, do the skills fatigued, so they get a feeling about what it's like to be 20 sets deep into an innings, mate. So like having those, I normally tend to go for 3 of those maximum in a winter. So in a week, it might be total distance, high speed running, overs bowled, things like that. If you overreach those and prepare them at least 3 times, or maybe max 3 times, in the winter, they know what it feels like. They know what it feels like to be that deep. They know what it feels like to be that fatigued and to execute the skill well. They might be pissed off, but you're going to get so much more, not just buying from them when they realize in the season, but you're also going to know that they can cope with it. Because ultimately as there's been a lot of chat about, poor S&C leads to bad injury, or injury risk, or increased injury risk. And I think it mainly just comes down to just guys aren't adapted to the demands of the game. Boys don't expose themselves to the demands of the game enough, and in the winter, or specific things, or on enough occasions. So it just means that when they do it in the summer, they break down. Mate, they're literally got the breaking strain of a soggy Kit Kat when it comes into the season, mate, and they're just like, they're absolutely screwed when it comes down to them playing 3 or 4 county championship games where they're 4 days in the dirt. So yeah, mate. I'm moving on to your point, mate. I think, for a club cricketer, then this is a question I had for you, mate, if you don't mind me asking, is for you, where guys, let's be brutally honest, they might not be professionally contracted, so they're doing it off their own backs. Do you almost feel sometimes you get more drawback, or do you get more kind of motivation to improve because they might have had a bit of a shit weekend? They might have had a bit, they might have been absolutely tapped everywhere. They might have got, first baller. What are do you get a few differences in there? Because, from like a pathway point of view. I definitely do. I'm just like, guys just can't be asked. And then some guys are mega up for it. And you're just like, Jesus Christ, like this is two different ends of the spectrum, yeah?
Mate, 100%. I think, like, for me, it's definitely the balance, or the coaching element comes into it. Then it's managing motivation, it's managing expectations. It's those conversations between sets, or with my online clients. I'll have I'll schedule calls and we'll chat about the game, and we'll integrate some skill stuff and some mindset stuff in that too. It's managing that expectation, just trying to keep players on task and process driven, and really making sure they're not having one bad performance and they're throwing the toys out of the cot and think they need to completely change everything. That's what, like, some people are like that, and some people are. I like to think that the longer someone work with me, the more they're like, okay, one bad game, what can we learn, and then motivated to get better. Whereas probably people before they start working with me, be one bad game, I need to change something. There's no point doing this anymore. And so I think that's a lot of my job, is keeping people on task and keeping them accountable towards the goals they want to be and the goals they want to achieve, and sticking to that training process of consistency. Because you're right, throughout a season, like it goes up, they play a good game, or you're down, you play a bad game, but the best players stay the most consistent. So very, very much like that. Like, it's very up and down, and that's my job. I feel like most of the time, more than what the gym program they're doing, it's more keeping them focused on what matters most, which is their consistency and just getting better every single day and sticking towards that process. Because if they just focus on getting better every single day, they give themselves the best opportunity to go into next week and have a good game. And then it's also developing routines and strategies in place throughout the week that allows them to move on from good or bad performance and just focus on the very present moment, because that's the only thing they really can influence from there. So that's kind of the big thing there. So you'll get people throughout the season up and down and changing, which is dealing with people. So, and then from there as well, it's about making them feel good going to the weekends as well. That's why the individualization point of view is really big. And when you get to work with people for a good amount of time, I've worked with people for a few years now. I sort of know what makes them tick, and I know what makes them, what is good for their body, what they like to do going into games, and we can sort of work together. And it's like, if I'm getting the stimulus that I want, and they can sort of choose, I'll give them, some of the athletes, good autonomy on exercise selection. So I'll go, all right, you can do a front squat, you can do a split squat, you can do a Bulgarian, pick which one you want to do. And I mean, very similar exercise, very similar stimulus, but do the one that you just feel best. Or I'll give them a bit of everything throughout the whole year. In the last block going in the finals, I'll give them the option, and then they can go, all right, I've tried this. Oh, this one better. Bang, let's go into there. So yeah, to circle back on that, it's very much, I think, a big part of my job is keeping people on task, because it's very objective and easy for me to go, hang on, that's just one bad game. Don't worry about that, because you're doing all these things. You're stacking days of getting better. Just because you played bad last week doesn't mean you can't play good this week. But when you're in it, and I know when I was playing, like, gee whiz, I'll be up and down emotionally as well. But that's why I think it's really good to have a good pit crew behind you. So good mentors, good coaches with cricketers to keep them aligned towards their goals. Otherwise, people would be darting off everywhere, changing things when they don't need to be changed.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Right, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I think also, like, I love the point where you mentioned about, giving them the option, because ultimately I think even if it's something which they still don't want to do, even if they know, like, even if we know in our minds, we're just like, mate, they're going to get the same out of these two exercises. We're just like, if we put them in the driver's seat into what they're doing, the buy-in it comes naturally with it. And you're like in your head, just like, tick, like, thank you, I'll take that. And they come from, like, just struggling into the gym, and they're just like, oh, Fitz, I just don't want to be here right now. And then you're just like, right, cool, what do you want to do today? And it's like, right, cool, if it's a batter, specifically, just moving off topic, I'm just like, I might go, we'll do some beach weights today. Should we do some beach weights today? And it might, it's not junk volume. I'll still make it. If for example, if it's a player who's not playing and they might be a bit pissed that they've not been selected, it might be, right, cool. Let's get a blast going. Let's get the music pumping loud. Let's get sleeves rolled up, mate. Let's get in let's have a bloody great 30, 40 minutes. And let's lift some tin, mate. And like some of the boys absolutely love it. I'll get involved as well, and they're just like, "Oh, sorry, Fitz. Oh, sorry, mate." So yeah, I think in season especially, mate, is where we need to get as creative as possible with our work, and being that much more open to change, because like you mentioned, mate, there's so much more that influences a player's, mood from other stuff that's going on, which affects our stuff. But we've just got to be understanding about that. That's not going to change. That's not going to change. And, you hit the nail on the head. So when it comes to like a club cricketer, when they're not contracted, they might be trialing, and, they're playing grade cricket, they're playing high-level club cricket, they might be playing minor counties cricket. What makes them tick, right? What are you, right? Steve, who's playing for, is playing in the Derby Premier League, and he's driving an hour to play, second team cricket for Leicestershire. Let's say an example. He comes to me if he came to you or me in the morning and said, "Oh, Fitzy, I'm just feeling like crap today. Can we skip the gym?" I'm just like, right, cool. Why are you feeling like that? And then once you understand what's going on, you can say, well, can I ask you a question? Why are you doing what you're doing? Are you doing it for you? Are you doing it for your family? Why do you play for Leicestershire second team? Is it because it's for a bit of cash, or is it because you want to become a professional cricketer? And 99.9% of the time, they will say it's because I want to become a professional cricketer, Fitzy. And it's like, right, cool. That's what I want to hear. It almost comes down to being a bit of a counselor sometimes with them, because, and I'll be brutally honest, Coxie, with you, a lot of the time, I would rather be a good bloke to my players, and this is going to come across badly to some S&Cs, and some S&Cs who are listening, or some skills coaches who are listening, are going to be like, he's off his rocker. But if I build good relationships with my players know that they can approach me about whatever they want. If a member of staff is rude, condescending, just shit bloke, they're not going to approach them when something's wrong. They're not going to approach them when, they don't feel quite right. They're just going to crack on. And that's where the risk comes. So if they're not feeling great, they're a bit run down, they don't want to tell that specific coach because he's a bit of a dickhead. Excuse my French, sorry.
Go for it, mate. I love calling people dickheads. If they're a dickhead, they're a dickhead.
They're not going to approach them. And, I would much rather be the guy who's approachable, even if it's not something about S&C. I can then relay that up the chain to fix that scenario if they feel that they can approach me with that. So if it is a skill-related issue, I'm going to say this openly, and I'll say it to the day I die. The multidisciplinary team that we've got in the academy at Derbyshire, mate, is the best MDT I've ever been a part of, and will be, because the relationship that we've got with each other, we can just openly speak about whatever we need. So if a player comes to me about something about skill, I know that I can't fix that, but I'll relay that to our coaches, and then they will be able to fix it without that player knowing that I've gone to our coaches. So yeah, mate, some coaches and some PTs and some skill coaches create such a scary and unapproachable environment where players are just shit scared to talk to them about the truth. You might have your absolute outliers who don't have an issue with that, but mate, like, as long as you're approachable, mate, like, you're going to be in such a better position to get buy-in than anyone else. So 100%, mate, 100%. Like I mentioned, mate, you end up being a bit more of a guidance counselor than you do an SSC sometimes in the middle of the season. But, I love it, mate. I love being able to know that I'm approachable and guys can chat to me about whatever they need. Go for a coffee before we, one more recovery days, and being able to really know what makes that person tick, mate, is up there with one of the most important things that I've developed and I will continue to develop, for sure.
Mate, Spot on. I reckon that's a great lesson for cricketers and that as well, is to surround yourself with people who you can trust and who are like someone you can lean on at all times. Like you're going to have, the first things first, you can only control what you can control. And
Exactly.
like you can't control if you've got a coach that goes off and sprays you and they're inconsistent energy, they have inconsistent mood. Like you can't control that, and you just gotta let them be a dickhead. If they're gonna be a dickhead, you just gotta let them be a dickhead. And
Exactly.
I've played under coaches that are hotheads and I love going off at you and that, but I also play with some real good coaches. And when I was younger, I really struggled with the coach that would go off at you and sort of like put you down a little bit and that. Like it didn't really bring the best out of me, but I didn't have the skills in place or the people around me, or I didn't know how to communicate that to other people as well, like how to sort of navigate myself through situations. And that's what I really pride myself on too, with helping, all cricketers, kids, adults, deal with other people and help them communicate with other people that they might struggle to communicate with. And I think and also just being a part of like an environment where they feel like that they can come and be safe and get better and feel like that, not getting judged or not, they're in a place where they belong and things like that. I think there's nothing more. I think that's an absolute basic, a fundamental performance and living a good and getting better is being in a great environment, training environment where people are pushing to get better, an environment where you're allowed to make mistakes and be vulnerable. And because making mistakes is where you're going to get better from if you're learning from. But if you're shit scared of making a mistake, you're probably in the wrong environment, is what I tell people. So setting yourself up with the right people, the right coaches, the right mentors, listening to the right people, and then having call like your pit crew, like you're the F1 car, but you got these people around you. It might be parents, it might be your S&C coach, it might be career coach, it might be a mentor or whatever it is that surround you, and then it allows you to just go there and when you go to training or go to a game, you have a clear mind, you have a clear plan, you understand what you want to do. Whereas if you just do it yourself as a cricketer, I feel like you're just asking for sporadic, inconsistent results because you're just going to be bounced all over the shop, because it's so much easier to get advice from other people than sometimes is to give yourself advice.
Definitely. And mate, me personally, like I'm always, and that might just be me slightly being a bit of an extrovert, but I will always reach out to someone and want to go for a coffee to chat about something, then keep it inside and know that I'm just swirling my own thoughts around. I'd much rather call mum or dad, call my brothers, or speak to my missus, or my best mate who coincidentally works with me as well, about what's going on. All my best mates from Gibraltar as well, and just chat to them, just chat shite for an hour about what's been going on. And genuinely, I would much rather do that than sit on the sofa, swirling around and not get anywhere with it. And mate, 100%, like 100%. And I almost think that some people just get in their own head sometimes and they almost talk themselves out of it. And that's where, I think we come in, myself and yourself, Coxie, and when they're in the gym, they're in between sets, just chomping each other's ears off about what's happened on the weekend, and it just almost becomes a bit of a therapy session, the gym does. And it's funny because you're just like, you get someone in your ear, from the MDT or like the medicine staff being like, oh, that session's not intense enough. And you're just like, yeah, but, I'm actually, helping him through, or trying to chat to him about something really important that's going on with his life, and then we're going to get to work, So, yeah, it's about almost having that right balance between it. And it's so different for different people. But I almost think that some people on just different ends of the spectrum where they are in your face, that you get the work done and you go home. Whereas I'm on this, there's other people on the other side who are a bit more relaxed, probably a bit too relaxed. And, they become almost buddies with their players and, they don't quite get their buy-in that way. And I'm kind of in the middle here somewhere where, I'm building relationships with their players and building buy-in through doing that. I'm making myself approachable, but then also, being a bit of a broader bloke and 6'3" probably helps. But I can definitely let my vocal cords go if someone's not getting on my right side. So, having that right balance is dead key, mate. It's dead key.
Mate, 100%. And that's like the beauty of a good coach is being a bit of a chameleon, and you can provide the right message with the right tone and the right communication style to the right person when they need it at the right time. Like, you know, how you communicate with somebody after they've taken a 5-5 versus might be different versus, different to how someone after they've broken up with their girlfriend. You know what I mean? Like it's as humans, we need connection, and we need to really strong communication underpins everything, and being in that right environment is absolutely golden for that sort of stuff, mate. Absolutely golden when it comes to development and just getting better. When it comes to, let's go back to the preparing a cricketer for the sort of demands of the game and things like that. What do you reckon? Where does building when it comes to sprint training program and things like that, when do you dose your sprint training, and what are your thoughts on sprint training for cricketers? Like, how often should they be doing it, and how much of a value you put on it compared to, let's say, a 10K run or something like that?
Yeah, mate, that's a brilliant question. First and foremost, I think guys like, Jonas Dodu and others have set the mark as to, where, speed development and sprint training comes into it. And, I could chirp Zero off all day as to chatting about sprint training. For me, and what I didn't mention before, when we were talking about kind of on a microcycle kind of level on a weekly basis, I will try and get the most demanding, especially closer to the season. I will try and get, not only when they're most fresh, so get the most demanding or most kind of taxing session or dose done at the beginning of the week. When they're freshest, when they've got more time to recover in the week, they might have 2 recovery days in there. So I get that done as early as I can in the week. It allows any delayed soreness to dissipate. It allows any adaptation to come into effect. Probably won't happen that quickly, but we're talking about weeks before, months before. And we also, silly little things which some people don't think about, moving from guys who have been playing indoor, training indoors all winter months to moving on to grass, that takes a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks to adjust to. From a ligament and a tendon perspective, boys' ankles and hips and knees are going to be flaring and bursting out the bubble because they're moving on to a softer ground. There's been a little bit of rain about, so it might be, a bit heavy underfoot, so preparing those guys for that, so for us, it might be using things like the AstroTurf, it might not be spot on 100%, but when we don't have access to grass, it's how can we best manage that? So, for example, for our sprint training, it used to be done on a game day. So on the day, that's changed slightly. When I took over, I moved towards doing it early in the week. So, for example, boys have had Saturday and Sunday off. They're in on the Monday. That's our high-speed running day because I know that I've got a rest day tomorrow, or I know that I've got a lighter day tomorrow. And additionally to that, working with the skills coaches, like you and Barnsley mentioned, you almost want, if you do want a player to be absolutely cooked moving into their skills session to replicate what it's like to be playing in the county championship or playing in the Sheffield Shield for on day 3, you've got to expose them to that. So I might move that a little bit later on to mimic that, or I might add an extra conditioning element in there, maybe not a 10K specifically, but it might be using things like interval runs where I've got my loud voice out and I'm like 20 seconds lads to get to the line, and you got to recover back in 20 as well, so calling down the tempos, 17, 6, and the boys take the piss out of me all the time. It's quite funny. I'm walking past the gym or and walking past the nets, and they're just like 90 seconds, lads. I'm just like, oh, shut up, lads. All right. But no, it's quite funny. It's good crack. It's quite funny. Yeah, some of the boys are brilliant, mate, and they definitely make the job a lot easier. So yeah, that might be where we do it, because it might be a case where, for example, we use off-site locations as our ability to get long run-ups in, for example. So for me, it might be about prioritizing those 2 sessions to make sure one week they're incredibly fresh for those 2 sessions, and then 1 week they're incredibly cooked for those 2 sessions. And that just comes down to and we mentioned building relationship with players, but we all communication within the multidisciplinary team and your pit crew, like you mentioned, mate, is even more vital. Because if you're not on the right lines, mate, players going to be all over the shop. So yeah, definitely try and get most of the demanding stuff that we do, whether it is maybe in a eccentrically dominated block. So like things like Nordics, really heavy RDLs with heavy tempos, uppers, with a massive eccentric element, slides, stuff like that. Get them done early in the week. Let the soreness adapt, let the soreness dissipate, which will hopefully, fingers crossed, bring the adaptation. Excuse me. And then, we can almost filter and get the rest of our work done throughout the week. And like I mentioned before, mate, if boys are a bit undercooked because they've not hit maybe a target that we want when we look at the GPS data retrospectively, it might be on a Saturday that they do go on a little bobble for 6K, 7K. It depends what we want, really. It might be even 2K. Do you know what I mean? I might just be like, look, go with the missus down the road for a coffee, have a little bobble, and that's you done for the week, and then recover. So yeah, it differs, mate. It really differs differs with that. I've lost track of your question, mate. For being honest, my apologies.
No, mate. You covered, mate. No, that's awesome, mate.
Okay, sorry about that. I was like,
mate,
what was Coxie's question again? Sorry, I was going to a bit of a tangent there.
Mate, don't stress, mate. Just keep chatting, mate. It's awesome, mate. You've been awesome with your time, Fitzy. So thanks so much, mate.
All good. No worries.
I'm going to fire one more question off that out, and if there's anything else, mate, you want to keep on going with and want to chat about, then please hit me up. Sure. But one last thing I want to ask. So let's say for cricketers aspiring to get better and to play the best level they possibly can, what are like 3 training methods, mindset changes, standards, lifestyle adjustments? What are just 3 things that they can apply right now today that could just improve them and set them on the right track to get to where they want to be?
Cool. I'm going to give you 3 from a academy, maybe young side, and I'll give you 3 from an older side, mate, because mate, you've been gun as well by having me on, mate, so I think you deserve it. So I think from an academy side, with both of those, being robust to play the game is first and foremost, because, if you're playing to that professional level, yes, you need to be able to cope with those demands. Secondly, for the academy of the young player, why do you play the game? You're going to have times where it sucks, where you're doing really, you're in the gym, you're late evenings, some people travel in the car 2 hours. Why do you? It's all because you love the game and you want to become a professional cricketer. And thirdly is enjoying the process of moving from a young player to becoming a professional cricketer, because when you get to becoming a professional cricketer, the schedule is so packed where some people lose the love of the game. And it comes down to that second point, where they lose the love of the game because they just haven't enjoyed the process of getting to that point, about what it's like to be on the road for maybe a week at a time, maybe 6-7 days at a time. In a T20 season, we might be, train, play, or train, rest, play, rest, train, travel, play, whatever it is. So, those link in together. Maybe for a club cricketer, mate, I would probably switch those round and be like, enjoy it. So enjoy the process, why do you play the game, and then be, a little bit robust, because, even a club cricketer, it's tough. It's a tough game. It's a bloody tough game. So you still got to have a little bit of prep, even if it is your village cricketers just doing a little bit of a basic warm up, mate. Is enough for me from that side, if that makes sense. So, and then from your professional side is, from if you're a professional cricketer, and it always comes down to, again, everything that we're doing is making you, again, I use the word robust, but it's because, mate, anything that we do in the winter doesn't matter if they bowl 10 balls and get injured into their first spell in the season. It doesn't matter. Anything that we've done for the previous 6 months doesn't matter. So being robust to play the game, having an open mind, because in professional sport, it might be a high staff turnover from players or coaches. So some people might have different philosophies. So being open-minded to learning from different coaches, and, ultimately surround yourself, with the best people in your environment, because when the times are tough, when we are traveling as much as we do sometimes in the season, like we mentioned, mate, and rightfully so, Cox, we're not going to get along with everyone in a team or in an environment, but find your core group, which then you can almost use as your driving factors for the gym, for recovery. All right, cool. So I might go, boys, head over to Nuffield Health that we have across the road, and let's do some recovery. They might do that recovery together, but one of them might be like, oh, I really can't be asked for this recovery, but they drive each other. So that is what we use. Oh, I don't want to go into the gym today. No, come on. Fitzy wants us to get our lift done, or when their skills aren't going great. I know they back each other. Whether it might be a little tap on the arse and come on, mate, come on, let's go, or it might be something with training where they do some extras throughout the season. So yeah, those are the three. Well, 9. Okay, turn 3 into 9 there, man. I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, that's probably where I'll have, yeah.
Mate, you're the absolute man. I was going to say, mate, thank you so much for coming on today. You've been unbelievable. I think it's an absolute nuggets of gold, mate. It's been absolutely unreal. So
yeah,
I'm going to leave it to you, mate. Have an unbelievable day, mate. And I'll speak to you soon, legend.
Top man, thanks so much for having me on again, Coxie. Appreciate it, mate.
Awesome. No worries, guys. I'll leave all Fitzy's social media stuff and links down in the description. So if you have any questions, leave a comment on the YouTube video or send some through my way, and I'll answer them for you guys. But thanks so much for listening. Thanks, Fitzy, once again, mate. And I'll speak to you guys soon.
Thanks, guys.
Legend.
Beautiful, mate.
Awesome, mate. Legend. Thanks for that, mate. And that's a wrap for today's show. Thanks for watching, guys. I know you haven't subscribed yet, so please make sure you do right now. Leave a review and let me know any feedback or any questions that you have from this previous episode. If you are interested in becoming the best cricketer that you've ever been and getting coaching from me, I have all my links down below in the description for either my in-person and based in Melbourne or my online coaching where you can be anywhere around the world. Thanks, guys. Feel free to share with a friend, and thanks for tuning in. Win the day.